Happy Friday to you and yours. Welcome to another episode of Seminole Sidelines. Aria Masudi, Pat Burnham, Kurt Weiler. You know the fellas well. And we've got a action-packed show for you here. Appreciate those of you tuning in here at 12:33. Pat wanted to make a joke about the portal. I will let him have it.
I was just going to say we were late getting on air today because Aria was thinking about entering the portal, and he was the host for today. So we couldn't start till he had both feet in the boat, and it took him a couple extra minutes to get going.
I was coming up with a goodbye message to post and then delete. We will be keeping our eye on that the rest of the week. Those of you wondering, I guess Micah Pittman put up a message this morning saying goodbye, then promptly deleted it. And so we continue to monitor what has been a wild week here at Florida State.
3 more days. Portal closes Sunday. Thank God.
Yeah, no doubt. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, those of you watching live, please ask questions. Interact with us. We would love to have you be a part of this show. This will be available on podcasts as soon as we're done. Spotify, Apple, and wherever else you get your favorite podcasts. Make sure you subscribe to theosceola.com. Kurt, Pat, Fish, Bob, and Jerry have been hard at work all week long trying to keep up with what is rapidly changing in this landscape that I don't think any of us are used to. And so we will talk some baseball and softball a little bit later on. Big win for the Noles against the Gators on Wednesday. And FSU Baseball had a rain out. And so they play at Notre Dame in what is Link Jarrett's return to his former school. We won't keep you waiting, though. Josh Farmer, what a week it was. 48 hours, I think, that may have taken some years off of all of our lives trying to get this right. Pat, we'll start with you. When it comes to the way that things are going now, you were talking to us in our group message, you and Jerry, that this is going to be the new norm, and that this is something you just have to adapt to and adjust to if you're college coaching staffs and media covering everywhere. Yeah,
well, listen, obviously the transfer portal had been very good to Florida State up until probably this year. I mean, and we'll have to wait to see how it pans out. It's not over yet. But, yeah, certainly this is the beginning of a new era in college football with the NIL and the transfer portal both combined. It's going to be the new norm. You're going to have a bunch of players that you sign with that are going to have the option every semester of entering the portal, and then they have the right to back out or to move on. But it's a chess game to some extent. And listen, I know the collective is called The Battle's End, but it might need to be called The Battle's Just Beginning because this is going to be a repetitive thing as we move forward here. And, listen, Josh Farmer, we heard rumblings about it for days. Then when he goes in, you're expecting that he's gone, right? Then 5 hours later, he's out of the portal. I don't know how all that played out behind the scenes, but listen, there's a lot of ways to look at it, but this is it's going to be happening everywhere across the country. It is happening everywhere across the country. As Kurt said, we still got 2.5 days to deal with it. And from the sounds of it, based on Micah Pittman's tweet, Josh Farmer's not the last one. We've seen our Amari Cooper go in, and now Bishop Thomas looks like he's headed that way, possibly Micah Pittman. So, yeah, listen, it's frustrating. I know we've talked about that behind the scenes. It's a little bit too much drama in a sport like football where you've got some kids that are leveraging what they've done in years past and what they've done this spring in the portal. So, but, listen, as far as Josh Farmer is concerned, there were a couple of factors there. A lot of people were worried that Darrell Jackson would go if he left. So you kept 2 players here, more than likely with Josh staying. And at the end of the day, this is how it's going to be from time to time. How many more times will Josh be able to do this? We'll see because it may not be the last time. But listen, all is well that ends well, right? I mean, this is basically turned into free agency. If they have not entered the portal, not transferred before, and still have that penalty-free year to transfer, they're going to be able to leverage that. Every kid in America is, and I'm sure we're not quite through this thing yet.
Kurt, what comes to mind when you think back on what has been an incredibly insane week, to put it bluntly? I mean, you've got He's gone. No, he's back. He's 50-50. No, he's gone. No, he's back. We don't know. And it comes down to a conversation I'm sure that he had to have, maybe a game of chicken, so to speak, with the coaching staff to see who would buckle first. There's no doubt that this happens in the NFL ranks, right? Like when you talk about contract negotiations and things like that. How do you process what has been a crazy week?
Yeah, I mean, it's not my favorite thing to have to cover. I mean, the back and forth and trying to talk to people who have various bits of information into what Josh may be thinking, or if there may be teams that are already interested in him. I mean, that's always a part of this too. Is I think you can't totally ignore the role tampering plays in this. And I'm not by any means saying that whoever did that is in the wrong, because I think everybody's doing it to varying degrees. So I'm not going to try and claim Florida State higher ground or anything, but it's unfortunate that there have been some, I think, unintended consequences of some of the things. And I mean, people have talked about maybe the kind of needing more guardrails, and I think you're starting to see more and more of why with situations like this.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Kurt, guardrails. All right, so how many times are we going to let a kid enter the portal without some kind of penalty because he's holding the team he's with hostage to some extent? Now, let's just sometimes a kid enter the portal is the right thing to do for both the kid and the school, right? In this case scenario, we would make the argument that the best thing, at least in our opinion, was that Josh stay. He's going to be a starter, or at least a co-starter on this football team, on a very good football team. It's intriguing. It's man drama, as Jerry likes to say. But yes, the back and forth yesterday was very interesting. But listen, and it's a good thing for Florida State that he did stay, because there's an old business adage. It's cheaper to retain an employee than it is to go out and attract another employee. And you, even if you got to give that employee a raise, which is probably what happened in this circumstances. But my concern is, and not just in Josh's case, how many times is this going to happen? Not only at Florida State, but with other kids at other schools, where every semester they're trying to leverage whatever improvement they've made, or because of the way the roster may or may not sit.
Well, and so we talked about Daryl Jackson, and I think he tweeted kind of the spear emoji, the kebab, Wednesday night. I think it was him it felt like the realization of, I mean, he still hasn't gotten his waiver technically. I think there's still some optimism he will. I don't think it's kind of been denied. They're not in the appeals process yet, but he's still kind of waiting to get that resolution. And if he were to leave after only kind of being here for the spring, I feel like there's no way he would have got the waiver, because the big part of the waiver and why I think there's some confidence is I know the sick family member who he's now moving close to, kind of leaving Miami and moving with much closer to here at Florida State. And so you kind of lose that part of the argument if you're leaving the school right there. And so I'm not sure he would have left even if Josh did, but I think it's great that you didn't even run the risk with Josh, because if you lose both, I mean, all of a sudden defensive tackle's a transfer need again, because you're kind of right back close to where you were last year, honestly.
Well, the only good news about that is the transfer market for defensive tackles and ends might be a little bit better right now, where the portal is, than some other positions. So I did do a lot of research on that yesterday when these things were being said and going on. But yeah, so it's listen, I'm glad he stayed. I think we talked about it on Wednesday. If he left, it was still going to be a big departure, even though Florida State had some depth. And we're talking about Josh Farmer here. If you could lose a guy or a person at a position, losing one defensive tackle, you could probably absorb that. But as Kurt said, if there was some trickle-down effect from Josh leaving, then it becomes a more tenuous situation, and you don't feel as good about that position as you would have otherwise. But listen, I'm sure they'll put them behind this. But the weird thing was all the tea leaves pointed to Josh leaving, and he was responsible for that with his tweets the pin tweets from Georgia football. Then they were doing live Instagram videos, I believe. I didn't see them. I've only heard about them, where they were talking about transferring. It was him and Daryl Jackson. So listen, some of this was brought on by the kids. And listen, here's the thing that these kids and their parents and their handlers are going to have to come to realize. When you start taking this, and I don't know what the money is for some of these guys, or basically, I know the only guy I've ever heard from Florida State talk about money was Micah Pittman, saying he made $150,000 last year. I don't know if that's true or not. But when you're starting to make that kind of money, these kids are going to have to start growing up a little bit faster and quit doing some of these immature things that they're doing. Now, some of it is immaturity because they are kids, but when you start taking six figures from a collective or a university or however you want to term it, you have to grow up a little faster than the 19 or 20-year-old that is making $10 an hour working at the bar or working at Circle K or working at Publix. So listen, I think we'll see some guardrails put on this as we go. Kurt and I were talking about the Daryl Jackson. What if Daryl Jackson had entered the portal again? Well, it would have been a perfect time for the NCAA to make an example out of you cannot go into the portal back-to-back semesters and be eligible somewhere else. I think they would have, and listen, they've already talked about not allowing that, but it would have been the perfect situation for, and I'm sorry, Florida State would have had to been the test case for it, but, I think there will be guardrails because this is going to continue to go on.
Well, we've seen a few other cases. I think there was the defensive back from North Carolina, I think transferred to Penn State in January and is already back in the portal, I think going again. And I don't know, there were certain situations where maybe a team misrepresented a role they were going to have or something like that. That's not the case with Daryl Jackson. He is going to be a starter or a very prominent player for them. But really at the end of the day, the Farmer thing's a big deal because, that would have been the most impactful transfer you've lost. Like nothing against Derek McClendon, who played a lot of football here, but Josh Farmer has grown a lot, physically and in terms of on-field product in 2 years here, and has much higher upside than someone like Derek McClendon does. It would have been your most significant portal loss. You're looking at the portal losses. There's some guys I think you see who would have played, would have had some sort of roles potentially, but Josh would have been far away. He's probably your third or fourth defensive tackle. So he to me, I think it would have had the biggest role of anyone they've lost to date. If Micah Pittman ends up entering, I guess that changes that maybe in terms of impact, but I think it speaks to, but at the same time, I think wide receiver, they're deeper.
Yeah, well, listen, I think that from an individual talent standpoint and potential of what he could be as a player, you're right. Losing Josh would, but I do think from a overall depth standpoint, losing Derek hurts you at defensive end because you're not 4 or 5 deep right now like they want to be, in my opinion. I think you could have overcome Josh transferring a little bit easier than you can what's going on at defensive end with Derek. But you're right. From an individual talent potential standpoint, Josh would have been a big loss.
Josh is like a more likely than Derek McClendon to be like an all ACC type player this year.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah. And that's what what I was getting at. But I agree with you on. We can maybe talk about Dion picking over some of the Florida State transfer. It feels like he's always gonna.
He's not done yet.
No, it feels like he almost like is super. Don't get me wrong. The Florida State guys, from where he's at, probably can help him. But it almost feels like there is a hyper focus on like, oh wait, Florida State.
Yeah, well, listen, we know our Marion Cooper, Duke Cooper's in the portal. His high school coach is now the director of player development or player personnel for Dion at Colorado, who just happens to be another former Florida State football player, James Chaney. So, listen, I'm not a smart guy, but even I can connect 2 dots. Listen, that may not be where Duke ends up or Marion Cooper, but you would certainly have to say that Colorado is going to be involved in that. So, you're right. I had tweeted out something about that on Twitter. And sure enough, David Hell retweeted that he's 40% sure that Dion's doing all this out of spite. So I don't know if it's true or not. But anyway.
This Dion experiment is going to be something fascinating to behold. How does a team that's like going to be 80% transfer additions next year, if he manages to pull that off? How do they mesh? What's team chemistry like on that team? There's no doubt Colorado wasn't in a great place. It's like it's hard to blame him too much for blowing it up, but the way he's doing it is definitely putting a spotlight on him.
Well, listen, he's going to have to – we'll get back to Florida State in a second, but here's my thing. Let's just say he's got to bring in about 40 scholarship players between now and fall. All right? The kids he wants are going to cost something. How much money does Colorado have in its NIL? And how much is Dion willing to go and try to call on his corporate buddies to try to help get – but anyway, it's a fascinating situation. I think he's polarizing in how he's handled this thing at Colorado. I don't think he's helping himself with taking McClendon and Gant and now maybe Cooper with Florida State fans. I mean, he's very divisive between even Florida State fans. I've seen a lot of things on Twitter, but yeah, listen, I mean, it's fascinating. I have team chemistry. It seems to be it's so much different than what I'm used to. It's hard to watch for me, but it may work out. It's never been done before. The portal is taking on a life of its own, as we're seeing every day. And what's going on at Colorado is fascinating, if not frustrating.
No doubt. I think Dion knows that he's trying to accelerate a timeline there at a school where it's probably not that easy to just recruit organically, even if you're Dion, right? Like you're not going to be able to win out west against some of the powers out there already. And no doubt Dion has his own brand that I think helps, but you've got to have gimmicks a little bit to be able to, if you want to accelerate, right, the timeline of Colorado and rebuilding that. So that'll be fascinating. I don't think we've seen the last of Florida State's players heading to Boulder, to Pat's point. Grant asks from YouTube, do you think the Pittman transfer is more about him being injured and missing most of the year, most likely not having an NFL future? I mean, I'm going to pass this on to Kurt, Pat, and Bob, but I would think that in this NIL, what came to mind is those kids that maybe don't have future, in football after their collegiate careers might make decisions based on some of the opportunities they have in NIL. Micah's very big in the influencer world and social media and YouTube and vlogs. Could this be a way for him to get back out west, closer to home, and also some better opportunities to make his mark in the entertainment industry, so to speak?
Well, I think that's probably more accurate than it having to do with his injury or potentially missing most of the year, because that's going to happen no matter where he's at, right? If he can transfer out, it's still going to. Those things are still true. He's still hurt. He still potentially could miss more time than he wants. The anticipation is, based on everything we've heard, is that he would be, if everything went well, he would be ready to play sometime in September. Now, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. But he should be ready at least for 3/4 of the year based on what we've heard. So I don't think it has anything to do with the injury or lack of not playing the NFL, that you would think that would only motivate him to get back quicker and get as healthy as quick as he could.
I think it's when he can be back on the practice field, but I think there is a question of, is that an injury where you're immediately back up to 100%, or does it maybe take a few weeks like we saw with Winston Wright last fall, where he didn't really look like himself when he was trying to come back? I mean, that's a pretty serious hip injury. I wonder if he might not kind of be himself right away, and so it might be later in the season than that. I don't know.
A couple other things with Micah we may want to consider is he would be a 2-time transfer. He would have to graduate from Florida State if he's going to be able to play immediately somewhere else, right?
He's been in 4 years, right? I think college.
Yeah,
I think he was at Oregon for 3.
He might be graduating here next week. I mean, it's very much a possibility.
Now Micah, again, we sat down with him in August, and I asked him point blank, what would a successful season look like for you and for Florida State? And the short answer was, Micah wants to be a first-round draft pick.
Yep.
And he wanted to win every game. Now, look, love the ambition. The family obviously sets a high standard. When your dad played in the NFL, your brother plays in the NFL. Dad won a Super Bowl with the Bucs. So I think Micah holds himself to an incredibly high standard, and he did elevate that room. Now, is he truly looking for more of a wide open depth chart? Let's just say it that way, where that Ron Dugan said, your catches would be spread around. I think Micah made the most of that by being an excellent blocker, sometimes the best blocker on the field among the receivers. But if he wants to make it to the NFL, if he's got, a vision, maybe that vision is to go somewhere else where he can just market himself purely from not just a numbers standpoint, but he just gets out on the field a little bit more. He gets a little bit more production and attention. That's just a little bit speculative on my part, but these are based off past discussions with Micah.
Well, this is all a little speculative because he tweeted it, but deleted it. So we'll have a resolution for sure on Monday's show to talk about then. But yeah, I think there is a world, like you said, Bob, where it's similar to Malik McClain, where if you're Florida State, is this a guy you want to lose? No, I don't think so. I think you would want him back. I think he's a good locker room guy, and had 30 catches, had multiple touchdowns last year, made an impact. I think, you hear about his blocking all the time too, and you see it. But also, it's if Micah kind of were to ask candidly, how many targets do you think I'm going to get this fall? What do you think Mike's going to say? And I think that's, similar to a Malik McClain, where you don't want to lie to a kid, and you're not going to be able to lie to a kid and say, I think we can throw you the ball 45 times. I don't think that's true. So he may be better served. We'll see. We'll see what the resolution says. If he posts another note, or maybe he wanted to do it on a YouTube video, I think it's entirely possible that's the case, and we'll see that later today.
Yeah, well, Mike is a really good football player. I think he had about 34 catches last year. But listen, he's, we're sitting here talking about him wanting to be a first-round pick, and listen, he should be happy he was the fourth-round pick. I don't think there's anything that says first-round pick about Micah Pittman. He's not even the best receiver on his own football team. That's Johnny Wilson. So, there's some things that you need to think about. And listen, maybe more touches as you guys are saying is what it's all about, and maybe there's a team. I know there's been some speculation about them going back out west, as RA has mentioned. Maybe there's a team that's lost a couple of receivers, and he's got a chance to be more involved in the offense. But he was, I believe, the second or third leading receiver on the team. Listen. If he wants to leave and it's because he thinks the grass is greener, hopefully it will be greener. Sometimes that does work out for people, but listen, or maybe he's just following the Josh Farmer plan, threaten to leave and stay, making it public. It seemed to work for Josh. Maybe that's his anticipation is that plan will work for him. Listen, I think the other thing is, as we've talked about, he's hurt. How many people are going to throw a bunch of NIL money at him at other schools? This is another one of those things that we're learning about the portal. There's an NFL team is not going to throw a lot of money at a guy that has a serious hip injury until they know whether he's going to be healthy. So is my question to be on Micah, are his options realistically as open as he thinks they are? Because this is not a sprained ankle or a surgery on a broken wrist. He's a wide receiver that has the run, and you don't, as Kurt said, you don't ever know how hips are going to respond. So anyway, I think there's a lot of questions that I have about that particular transfer, but he left a very well thought out message on Twitter before taking it down. But as Kurt said, listen, the crazy thing about this is Josh Farmer can go back in the portal before Sunday. So
and they can't.
I'm not saying that he is. I'm just saying that this is kind of the craziness of the portal.
I'm blaming you. I'm blaming you if that happens, Pat.
Maybe one of the rules should be once you take yourself out of the portal for a given period, you can't go back in for a year. But I'm just saying the silliness can continue with both of these situations.
Can I?
I have to imagine if that happened, FSU would say, see ya.
Yeah.
Not based on any intel, but if he actually, I think they'd be like, we're done with this.
No, and listen, I was just making a over the top example of how crazy the portal is, and what we've seen both these kids post that they want to leave, then take them down. And I'm just saying, it's just, I'm not saying that any of that's
no, of course.
No, yeah.
Bob, I got a question for you, and I guess, and then we can pass it around the panel too, because I am curious. Are you guys surprised that the NCAA doesn't have more guardrails on this? for a organization that has been so adamant on having control over certain things, sometimes without much logic, right? In the past and in other examples, are you surprised that the NCAA has allowed things to kind of get this out of hand? Because there's no way that they're just in the dark, right? Like they hear about these things. I'm sure they're getting bombarded with emails and phone calls and athletic directors. I mean, Stan Wilcox, former Florida State athletic director, still over there on the board, right, in Indianapolis. So are you surprised, Bob, start with you first, that things have not, I guess, had a little bit more organization on the transfer portal NIL front as we've gotten started with it?
The NCAA drinking game is anytime that you hear the word guardrail, you have to do a shot. And I think that's the problem is there are not enough guardrails. There are not nearly enough. This is going to be the new Dion rule, and it's going to be called the Dion rule.
Yes.
Somebody's going to have to say you can only take so many transfers in one cycle. And it's going to be because of Deion Sanders and maybe even guys like Kenny Dillingham. They're allowing first-year coaches to flip rosters, which is great. Mike Norvell would have loved to have this opportunity years ago. Let's be honest. If we're having this discussion back in December of 2019 or January of 2020, Florida State fans are going, this is awesome. This is great. But it's now the reality of how somebody is working the portal in a different means. I think the other part of your question, Aria, is the separation between the Indianapolis NCAA reality and the reality around college campuses around the country. There are two different worlds that everybody's living in. I don't think Indianapolis truly got it. Now they do. And now it's administrators and coaches are basically saying, wow, this is not what we had bargained for or wanted. What are fixes and solutions? I think I was talking about this with Tom Block and Keith Jones, on Front Row Knowles. I said, guys, this isn't what a lot of people want, but we are approaching idea season. The SEC meetings are coming up. The ACC meetings are coming up in Amelia Island, middle of May. Idea season is when administrators and coaches get together and say, okay, here's what's worked. Here's what hasn't. We really need to put together some proposals of how to fix things. And I think that's going to be the meat of discussions in May.
Just look on YouTube right now. Seminole School. I like the name, by the way, on YouTube. Perhaps if you're reading it on your screen, those of you watching, perhaps he knows Micah and saying, it is for legit and right reasons. And again, we were speculating. And if it is for reasons like, hey, he wants to get closer to home and advance his NIL and entertainment opportunities and YouTube and things like that. I mean, who are we, right? Like the whole point of collegiate athletes being able to make profit off their likeness and their images is to be able to better themselves in the future. So I guess we'll keep watching. Those of you listening on podcasts, I'll read it out. It says, yeah, Micah is transferring, but his reasons are actually 100% selfless and legit. They'll explain when it officially happens. Just know he is doing it for all the right reasons. And so we will continue to watch. My question to you guys now, and we'll wrap up football talk with this as we get closer to that half-hour mark of our show here on this Friday. Are you worried that this season specifically, let's take off and then let's branch away from the future. Is this a distraction for Florida State as they try and win the Atlantic Coast Conference this season, trying to make a playoff, trying to continue to push the pedal forward on the football field? Can things like this, be detrimental to a locker room? Pat, start with you.
Oh, I think there can certainly be some ripple effects from this, but I think you've got to take some comfort in knowing that it is April 26th and 28th, excuse me, and these guys won't really hit the field as a team together again until August 1st. So, you get these kind of things ironed out and worked out. These things will take care of themselves. The locker, listen, there should be a lot of leadership in that locker room with Jordan and Jared Verse and some guys like that. But could there be ripple effects? Yes, and the ripple effects will how long will they carry? I don't think they'll last through August. But yes, listen, the NIL in itself there's going to be some. The kids know what everybody else is making or getting. They see who's driving the fancy new truck and who's not, and all those things. They'll work it out. They know who deserves the things and they know who doesn't. But I think the fact that the portal window for the spring is open so far out from the start of fall camp that you have a chance to work through some of the ripple effects or issues that one player may have with another. But yes, it could.
I tend to think that like Pat's saying, I mean, there's not, correct me if I'm wrong, there's not a fall portal window. The next portal, once the portal closes Sunday, it doesn't open again until December. Unless you're a grad transfer. That's different for grad transfers until the 2023 season ends in late November, early December. So to me, I mean, that says that I don't think, I think this didn't cause any real ripple effects, honestly. I'm sure people want people to stay. I mean, I know you saw Jordan Travis, I think, sent a goodbye message to, quote tweeted Amarian Cooper's tweet yesterday. But I think that, I mean, the culture of this team's in a great place and is well established. And I don't think ripple effects of this in April, like Pat said, are still going to be a thing in August. Could there be some trust that someone like Josh Farmer has to earn back for what he pulled? Maybe, but I imagine he'll do that in plenty of time before preseason camp starts.
I have to imagine that it does. If I'm giving opinion here, Pat, you've been a part of locker rooms before in your career, playing, coaching. I've been in locker rooms in the high school ranks when kids start to compare one another to each other, right? Yeah. My NIL versus your NIL, my playing time versus your playing time. The dynamic between gentlemen in a locker room. The things that are said outside of the locker room about said human being. I have no doubt they'll patch things up. I think Josh Farmer is a good kid. I think he comes from a good family, and I think that Florida State has enough leadership, right? If this had happened 2 years ago when Norvell had gotten here, the culture and the foundation and the pillars hadn't been placed yet, you might have some more issues. I do think that leadership's in place right now, not from the coaching staff, right? From the players, to be able to mitigate this, have a conversation, and maturely move on to try and achieve your goals on the football field.
Listen, and there's going to be some players on that football team that totally agree with what he did, that he should have tested the waters and should have tried to find out what else was out there, because there's going to be other guys that are going to do that as they start to play. So anyway, listen, they'll work it out. Listen, we used to, you mentioned being in the locker room. Well, lots changed since 1980-something when I was playing high school and college football. But you knew – all right, so back then you used to get letters from colleges, right? There was no Twitter and no Facebook, and so you actually got it in the mail, and it all came to your school. Well, certainly you knew who was getting – you felt you were as good as this guy, but he was getting letters from a school you wanted. But that you – once you get on the practice field or on the game field, that all disappears. And plus, you get a chance to get after them on the practice, the guys that you think you're better than and all that. You get the chance to prove that daily on the practice field. But, listen, I think we're going to continue to see some of this go on. And I think you'll see some guys in that locker room who have no issue with what Josh did.
Jordan Travis, Fabian Lovett, Jared Verse are not going to let this become a thing.
No.
That lasts by any means. I mean, the leadership in that locker room, like you said, Pat, from 2 years ago. Yes. I mean, they're in a place now where it's not going to become some lingering thing that's affecting them way down the road.
Yeah. And I think that if Mike thought that this would be an issue, that he didn't have the leadership on that team to handle these kind of situations, I think he might have had a bigger opinion on which way he wanted to see this thing play out. And I think that, I think, and who knows, he may be getting player input. He may have a leadership council that he goes, talks to these. I don't know that he does, but I'm just saying, I mean, he seems like a guy that does listen to what his players have to say. And I think that he knows that he is sitting on a very promising season. They have potential to have a really strong season. I don't think he would let one kid dirty the water. I don't think he would.
Agreed.
Yeah, 100%. Pat, last question from me to you, and then we'll let you go. Or feel free to stay and talk some Knowles baseball, softball.
I'm gonna let y'all handle baseball.
Okay, no doubt. But last topic, and appreciate those of you watching. Looking at some of our live count, and it's doing really well here on this Friday. Obviously, when football is good in Tallahassee, and you all three know this, it is always football season in the 850 and in Seminole country. So my last question, Pat, conversations that you have had with the football community, with friends in the industry, family, what may be it. How are coaches feeling about this NIL transfer portal, and how do they have to adapt as we go forward? Because you said it earlier, it's changing every day, and it's never going back with the way that things are going right now.
Well, I would think that it's very frustrating for most of these guys. I mean, you take a kid like Josh Farmer, FSU spent 2 or 3 years recruiting him. You spent 2 or 3 years developing him, and now you got to fight to retain him. I think that gets very frustrating for the head coach. I think it's frustrating for his position coach, his recruiting coach, not really knowing what your roster may look like after you come out of spring practice. And I mean, most of the time back in the old days, you knew exactly what your team was going to look like coming out of spring practice. You knew exactly who your personnel was, what you could do, what you couldn't do, what you needed to work on. Now you have 2 or 3 kids leave. Duke Cooper was set to be a starter. Now you got to replace a starting safety or corner, wherever the hell they were going to play him, which may be a part of the reason he's not here anymore, because he wanted to came here as a corner and they moved him to safety. Who knows? But listen, from a coach, I have not talked to a coach that just says, you know what, I'm in love with this. Obviously, you've got to use it to your advantage like Mike has done, because it's a part of the reality. My concern is you've got a really sharp young coach like Mike Norvell, who seems to be a guy that is more suited for college football with the way his enthusiasm is, the way he conducts himself. He seems to enjoy recruiting. You know, he worked hard at it. My concern is you start getting these good young coaches like Mike Norvell and Lincoln Riley, and they get tired of playing this game every spring, and they get tired of playing this game every January. And Mike's offense translates to the NFL. Almost any RPO offense translates to the NFL anymore. I think you're going to start seeing good young coaches, assistants, and head coaches try to get in the NFL, because if they're going to be in it, they might as well be in it, right? I mean, hey, you give me the roster, you deal with salary cap, you deal with free agents, let me coach football. And I think most coaches, about the only coach in America that may be enjoying the NCAA transfer portal right now is the guy we talked about 20 minutes ago, is Deion Sanders, because he needs it worse than most people, and he's declared he was going to use it, and he is kind of making a mockery of it. But listen, until we put guardrails on it, and I don't know what those are, but I think most coaches are frustrated with it, and I think most people want to do what Bob's doing. It makes them want to have a drink. And I'm going to have a drink at 5 o'clock today and forget about the portal for at least until I wake up on Saturday morning. But anyway, yeah, to answer your point, I think that most of them would say they are not a fan of it. But listen, you cannot take away the fact, and the NIL has complicated the portal. All right, so it's a combination of two things. If there was no NIL, the portal would not be as active as it is. You could make that argument, but I think that it's here. You've got to try to use it to fill holes in your roster, because it is here. And we have all got to do a better job of accepting the realities of it. Coaches, people that love their programs that they follow, people that report on it. It's crazy. It's frenetic. It's sometimes nonsensical, but it gives us a lot to talk about. I mean, we sit here for 38 minutes at a time we're usually not talking about football. It's the old water cooler thing, the hot stove league, right? So anyway, listen, I think the coaches, to your point earlier, when the coaches and the ADs and the school presidents have had enough, that's when the NCAA will make change. When enough of these guys say, you know what, we can't do this. It's killing the fabric of our sport. It's going to turn away fans. I could talk for a lot more, but I do think that you'll see some changes down the road. But I do think most coaches are more frustrated with it than they are fans of it.
No doubt, Pat. No, again, always appreciate your insights. I'll be interested to see. I was having a conversation with a buddy at Florida State who works up in administration about player personnel and coaching personnel, support staff that they have to hire now, more support staff to be able to handle this ever-changing NIL. And maybe at Florida State, Jeff Cupper has to take on a bigger role. Maybe you hire somebody, bring him in who's almost like a CFO, right? And can handle that aspect, because these are new days and college football is turning more and more.
Well, they probably ought to put the damn collectives inside the athletics building.
You might have to.
Wherever that's allowed. And I don't know if it's allowed in the state of Florida. But
it is now.
It is now. All right, so have that guy, your salary cap manager, whoever he's going to be, whatever you want to call him, because that's what it is. Have him right next door to the AD and the head coach, so that they can take care of these things as they happen. Bring it in-house. You don't need all kind of moving parts for one team. I mean, get them in-house. Have that person in-house so that, listen, and there may be no drops or 6 degrees. And they may be totally tied in together and there's nothing missing, but bring it in-house. I mean, that would be my other part. Bring it in-house. And listen, maybe that's another thing. Maybe the damn NCAA or conferences establish a salary cap.
I think the NCAA is not likely to do that, because that would be a big step towards admitting that their athletes are employees, which would be a problem.
They are employees.
But they're not. But I don't disagree with you. But
listen, I'm just spitballing here.
I
am totally
just
spitballing here.
And I'm telling you, the NCAA is not motivated to do that.
Listen, if I got a kid that walks into my office as a head coach, I don't want to have to track the guy from Battles Inn down who's down in Miami. I don't know anything about their operations other than I know they're not in the Moore Center. I want to be able to walk over to that guy's office and say, hey, listen, we got a situation going on here. What can we do to resolve it, type of thing? And listen, and it may be all handled by one person and the funds just come. We just go to the bank for Battles Inn. I don't know. But anyway, listen, it's going to be fascinating to follow. Still got 2.5 days. And I'll have more wide spitball opinions later on. The next time somebody else enters a portal, I'm coming.
Oh yeah, Monday. Hey, bring your heat Monday. We'll need you Monday on the show. As Alan Jackson and Jimmy Buffett once said, it is 5 o'clock somewhere, my friend.
That's right. All right, guys. We'll have a fun time talking about the other sports, and hopefully nobody will enter the window, the portal, while you guys are on.
Yep. Go get your weekend started, man. Enjoy it. Appreciate your insights. Good stuff from you, Pat.
All right, guys. Y'all have fun.
All right. Well, Bob, Kurt, it'll be fascinating when we go to Amelia Islands here in a couple of weeks and get a chance to talk to administrators and ACC folk, maybe put our heads together with a few other media members who cover other beats. And I think, no doubt, if you talk to Michael Alford, he'll tell you, get it more in-house, right? Let us have more of a say in how this stuff works. He has beat that drum and tried to be on the forefront of legislation in the state of Florida, as well as trying to be more involved as an athletics department in the lives of their student athletes when it comes to this type of thing. So I'm really intrigued when we go there. This is almost all crescendoing, right? For us to get there, have these meetings. It is going to be as fascinating. It felt like just yesterday we were talking about TV contracts and ESPN or Fox or who's moving what conferences. And I'm sure we'll still talk about some of those things. But this is going to, I think, win the day, so to speak, topic-wise, with NIL, transfer portals, and the future of college football. Fellas, we've got more that we can talk about on football. We've done almost 45 minutes. Some of our fans, I'm sure, want to hear about the softball program and baseball. Let's talk about 10 minutes maybe on softball and baseball. But Lonnie Alameda's group, you guys were both there. Saw you guys covering. I was on the call with –
we were all there, yeah.
We were with Jeff Colhane. What an honor that was to share a radio booth with him and bring the Seminole Sports Network from Learfield to the softball airwaves, a program that deserves it. 4 straight wins against the Gators, Kurt. I mean, they just continue to find ways, clutch hitting. Lonnie Alameda, a mastermind with the arms, and the Seminoles, they win game 1 of a 2-game set against the Gators.
I mean, I think they were far and away the better team. I mean, the score, I know obviously they had, I think, the tying run at the plate in the 7th inning, Florida did, but Florida led in large part early because of, mistakes. I think it was a leadoff walk and a pass ball and some stuff set up Florida's first run. And then an error by McKenna Reed, the freshman pitcher, who really, I thought handled the big spot she got thrown into pretty well for the most part. I think allowed one hit over 3 innings, and that played a role. And I think Florida taking the lead. But then, Florida State was the more dangerous team. They worked counts. They work the base paths as they do. It is just fun to watch Lonnie's teams with how athletic they are and just, how they approach the game. And then obviously her pitching approach too is always fun. I liked what I saw from Allie Dubois in that moment. I know she has had some ups and downs, but that was, a real up against a pretty good Florida lineup. And I think she had a really impressive inning when she came in and struck out the side. And then you turn to Kat Sandercock, who, the all-time saves leader. And saves aren't historically a softball stat, but they're becoming more of one. And I feel like that's a testament to the work that Lonnie's doing with how she approaches things.
Bob, they go to Reed first. Her second career start. She pitches pretty well, like Kurt said, for judging by the situation she was put in. Then the Noles go to Dubois and Sandercock, a couple of pitchers that thrive off being lower in the zone, get off speed with Dubois, drop ball with Sandercock, and they close out the Gators. What is it that impresses you most about Lonnie Alameda's team?
Yeah, I think it's very intentional. Every pitching move that Lonnie makes, there is a reason for it. For years and years, I think a lot of fans, maybe some of the media have said, well, just start Kat. Kat is your best pitcher. Just let Kat eat. Let her go 7 innings. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's the way softball has been, and a lot of schools around the country are still in that frame of mind. I think Lonnie's in the mode where, she wants to develop a McKenna Reed because next year, Kat's going to move on to, pro fast pitch softball. You have to develop her. Allie Dubois will be gone too. So you have to develop arms for these big pressure situations. That's why I think McKenna was out there. That's why McKenna's gotten some more starting opportunities. She's been in some pressure relief opportunities. I honestly like that Kat's been in some really high pressure late inning situations where she hasn't had the full burden of however many pitches, say, innings 1 through 4. I kind of like that. I think it keeps another head coach, another lineup very, very much off balance. The strength of this pitching staff is just not just in Kat. I would say Lonnie, felt in the preseason that they were 7 pitchers strong. I think that was maybe a little bit of wishful optimism for where, the full staff could be. But if they want to get to OKC and make a deep run, and this team feels like it truly can, it's going to be just because of that depth of the pitching staff, just the different options you can throw out there within the game.
Well, we didn't even see Allison Royalty in that game. And so I would imagine she could very well get the start next Wednesday night in Gainesville. I think part of it too, what you have to deal with in softball, I'm sure, as players are around for, Kat's in year 5, that Florida lineup, a lot of those players have faced her a lot. And if you asked her to throw 7 innings, you could run into some struggle. I feel like you saw that as Kelly Barnhill was that ace Florida pitcher. And as Florida State saw her more and more, it felt like they had more success against her because they kind of had faced her so many times and had that experience. And so I think it balances that out as well, where you're not asking Kat to go 7 innings against a team who she's probably faced, 6 times in her career? I wouldn't be surprised if that was her 6th time pitching against Florida.
Yeah, no doubt. And Hightower for Florida had pitched against Florida State numerous times. I think she gave up the walk-off to Janai Kerr, actually. Jeff Colhane pointed out a year ago. And what was a sweep for FSU. Guys, they're going to turn the page forward to ACC play. You got one more against Florida in a non-conference game next week. I want to say it's Wednesday, actually. So you got Tuesday, Florida State, Florida baseball, Wednesday, Florida State, Florida softball in Jacksonville and in Gainesville. But the Noles 2 weekends left in ACC play. They've got a couple-game lead on Clemson to win the ACC regular season. Listen to this stat. 18 of the last 19 years, Florida State has either won the regular season or the conference tournament championship of the ACC. It's dominance. That goes before Lonnie Alameda and what Joanne Graff was able to do. But they've got to beat Notre Dame, right? And Louisville, who are two teams that are sneaky, especially this weekend on the road. And then Louisville, who's, I believe, third in the ACC actually right now, with a mid-30s RPI, which is very improved and impressive for Louisville. Bob, what do you think is the ceiling for this Florida State softball team as they get closer to postseason?
I think maybe two things can be true. Lonnie has said that the ACC is getting better, and truly it is. We're seeing more and more stronger programs at Clemson, at Duke, and Virginia Tech. Playing those schools in the regular season makes Florida State better. It's not just Florida State has to go to Clearwater and book an Oklahoma series or an Oklahoma State series, and Florida being the litmus test. Those are all true, but now the ACC can make each of the schools better. I think it backs up your point, though, Aria. Florida State winning so many titles in a row, it shows that Lonnie Alameda has taken the program up a notch too. I do think this team, even though Lonnie would like to say each season is a separate animal, a separate team, and this being Team 40 that just picked up win number 40, I think there's enough veterans who they were there on that Sunday. Those two losses to Mississippi State, it felt like a team that was very vulnerable, felt the heat of that moment. And I think now they will be better prepared for those higher pressure situations. Enough of them were around for that, and you remember that, you're motivated by that. So I think that's perhaps the strength, is not just the depth, the talent, hitting, pitching, defense, running. It's memories of past failures.
Yeah, I mean, this team can win the national title. I'm not sure I'm picking. I mean, Oklahoma's lost once all year. It's not going to be easy even if you make it there to the end against them. But they're absolutely, I mean, they are talented enough and have the right pieces to do so if things break right for them.
And they have Kat Sandercock, which I think gives you a shot every time out. If Kenny Reed continues to progress, I think she's going to get more starting nods in the circle. And if Dubois, what we saw in that one inning against what is one of the best offenses in the country, Florida is incredible at the plate. If she can step up and kind of be more of what she was at Boston, right, when she transferred in, a 3-time Patriot League Pitcher of the Year, you've got a chance there. Because FSU's lineup, I don't think it's the strength of their team, but I do think it's still very good and has experienced pieces where even if you look at those batting averages and you're not just wowed like you would be if you saw Oklahoma's lineup, which on another level,
no one compares.
But once the postseason comes in and you wipe the slates clean, I trust some of those names to get hot for a couple of weeks and be able to carry you. So
Florida State came pretty close. I forgot when I mentioned it. They came pretty close to giving Oklahoma that second loss, or maybe it was first loss at the time. I mean, they played them well up there in Norman.
It would have been second, and they were leading in the middle innings there in the 5th over the Sooners. And we'll keep an eye on it. 6:00 tonight, FSU Notre Dame. That is on ACC Network, those of you who want to watch it nationally. And then Saturday, Sunday, I believe, is 1:00 and 12:00, 1 p.m. and noon, both of those games on the digital app for ESPN. And Florida State softball, baseball shared a charter flight to Notre Dame together this week as the guys also play at Notre Dame in what is Link Jarrett's return home. Bob, storylines are everywhere. Obviously, I think we all thought this would be a much more meaningful weekend in terms of the 2023 season and Florida State's postseason prognosis. Nonetheless, though, FSU is looking to build some momentum after they got a win over Virginia Tech last Sunday.
Yeah, I think, for Link Jarrett, he's looking for development, who's invested, who's still showing the pride. I think we've seen the storylines and the comments on the message board. Is this team quitting? Is it giving in? I think you can make the argument at times. Maybe the team has said, hey, we're down a ton of runs. We're not coming back today. But in general, big picture, it's a team that's really competed and had some really crazy, I won't say bad luck, misfortune. Link has admitted the defense has let down this team quite often, let down the pitching staff in some of these close games. We could erase an error here or there, and find some wins pretty easily for Florida State. I think he's focused on player development. I think an interesting question I asked Link, on Thursday before they flew up was, is making the ACC tournament, even though it's a real long shot, is that a talking point for them? And Link's response was, you don't want this kind of pressure. You want it in game 3 in Omaha. You want it in a super regional game 3. You don't want to be back against the wall in this situation, just truly trying to make it to Charlotte for an ACC tournament. But that could be good for some of the younger players, just to see how they handle those moments, each play, each pitch. It's an interesting philosophy. I think a lot of people might be laughing at this and saying, that's just nuts. Why is it a talking point? They're not going to make it. But honestly, when you're a coach and you're a player, you got to hang on to something as you play through these final 15. You've got to compete. And that's what we're looking for, competition and development.
It may not mean a ton in the grand scheme of things, but when it comes to trying to keep the guys you want to keep on this roster, when it comes to trying to be appealing in the transfer portal, like we know they're going to hit hard, it feels like there's a difference between 15 and 20 wins, doesn't there? Like, that does feel like significant just in terms of, having a single digit or like a 1, being in the teens feels like they're at what, 14 now, I think? Are they the 14 and what are they? 14 and
25.
30 or 14 and 24, 25, 24, I think.
14 and 25.
Okay, so I'm saying, go on a run. Like you said, your odds of making, especially when you look at who you're playing, your odds of making it to Durham are not great.
Nope.
But you have a Mercer series in there. You have a few midweek games you can win. It's a shame they didn't get to play Stetson. I think that could have very well gone well for them. But so it's interesting. You brought up that the winning vibes from softball. So they shared a plane, which makes sense. If they're both kind of on the same schedule going up there, why doesn't the ACC coordinate things like that more often? You feel that's a cost-saving metric for them to save a plane. You could do it for men's and women's basketball. You could do it for baseball, softball. It seems like an easy way to save the school some money if you're booking those trips together. But what do I know?
Yeah. I think it's the way the schedule worked out, and it panned out for them to be able to share that plane. And I believe they've actually shared one time already this season. I got to confirm that with the big shooter. But baseball, look, this season, like you guys have both mentioned, going to be tough to get to, I think, Durham in the ACC tournament, which at this point is the only way that the Noles can make the postseason. I say only way. I guess they could win out, period, and have a shot to make it interesting there. Statistically, maybe there's a shot. It's a very, very, very low percentage. They aren't that far behind in the ACC standings. I want to say it's like 2.5 games.
They're 3.5 out of 12.
12. Okay, so 3.5. So you're looking at needing to finish strong over the final few weekends and needing a couple teams to slip up. So you've got a shot. But that's not really what's important, I think, at this point. I think most people have accepted that this season is what it is and that you are building for the future and that the roster is going to look different next year, I think, pretty holistically. But they do need to build these foundation pillars, what we talked about. When we talked about it earlier in the show with Norvell, he had to build a culture. He had to build what his program stood for, the values, and how they want to be as an overall body, so that when the players change, it doesn't really matter. You're kind of plugging and placing into what fits and letting that talent be the difference. This is an important final few weeks for FSU, I think. If they can show some life, then you're seeing coaching and teaching and, again, the building blocks being put into place by Link Jarrett and his staff to propel them into the future. So that's what I'm looking for. They know this Notre Dame team front and back. This is going to be and Link even said it on record, it's the most familiar him and his staff will be with anybody all year long because all these kids are basically theirs. And so you probably have a strategic advantage, right? Calling pitches, knowing what those guys do well, and personnel and whatnot. So I think FSU, this is a big weekend, man. If they can win 2 out of 3 and win a series for the first time in a long, long time since that Pitt series, I think you can start to say that you're seeing signs of a program moving forward. And I believe I saw this week from Kendall Rogers that Notre Dame's Jack Finley is out for the rest of the season.
Ooh.
A lot of people are arguing that that's their most talented arm. Lefty had been starting recently a little bit, is having Tommy John. And so he is no longer available for Sean Stifler, who came over from VCU to Notre Dame. And that's a big loss. We wish the kid well. Jack Finley actually visited Florida State with his family last summer, thinking about potentially transferring to FSU, and ultimately decided to stay in South Bend. But point being, Bob, this is a big weekend for FSU, I think. If they really want to show signs of progress, the bats have been a little bit better. They're getting a little bit more consistent pitching performances and spots. Let's see if they can put it together and maybe win a couple in South Bend this weekend.
Yeah, I kind of scratched my head over the whole, James Tibbs at the top of the batting order. There are some Major League Baseball philosophies of why it works. It has worked for him. I was worried about the middle of that order kind of being able to, produce runs. Now you're in RBI mode. How do you hit with runners on base? It works at times. It doesn't work at others. I think this team needs to feel some confidence, hey, playing ball is fun again. Confidence, momentum, whatever you want to call it. I think it just needs to be a little bit of fun, and we'll see if it happens. Maybe they can dodge some of that bad weather that's supposed to be up in South Bend too this weekend.
Go read my story. I talked to James yesterday. We haven't kind of talked to players a ton during all this, so I thought he was candid. I appreciated his insights.
Cool. Good stuff, guys. I think a full hour today, heavy on the football talk. And I think, the week's events dictated for us to stay on here and talk a little bit. Touched on some softball, touched on some baseball. Please email us, send us your questions, comment on the show. This will be available on Apple and Spotify, as well as all your favorite podcast streaming services right as soon as we're done. Thanks again for those of you watching live on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Our next show, Monday, 12:30. Come have lunch with us and talk some Noles athletics. Hopefully a good weekend. The portal closes on Sunday. Maybe we will have some clarity on what this FSU team will look like going forward, and who Mike Norvell might potentially start looking at to add to FSU. That can be something we talk about on Monday. Again, please subscribe to the Osceola. We're doing great work over there, floridastate.rivals.com. And you subscribe, to our YouTube channel. Now almost we're above 1,500 subscribers, which has been really great. And we appreciate you guys. And so we do look forward to continuing to serve you here as we get into the month of May. Oh my gosh, it's May almost here. And Kurt, good work from you as always. Appreciate your insights. Bob Ferranti, thank you. Pat Burnham, he joined us earlier and did a great job as always. I'm Mario Masudi. Until we talk to you again, have a great weekend. This has been Seminole Sidelines.